But if you remember, after the draft, it was McCarthy who came out. McCarthy was like, yeah, this role, I'm envisioning a Randall Cobb type role. And as we go look at this 30 visit list, and I'm looking at the wide receivers, and I'm like, man, this is a deep ass class for wide receivers, and they only brought in one wide receiver. Huh. That's peculiar. Why would they bring in one wide receiver with all these amazing wide receivers in this class? And I'm looking at the running backs, and I'm like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8 running backs they're bringing in. I have to wonder if Malachi Corely, who I think is a fantastic prospect, I have to wonder if he is going to be viewed as kind of a running back wide receiver type as opposed to pure wide receiver, because he's not even a pure wide receiver in general. When you go look at his usage, I'll let you break him down here in a second. But from a number standpoint, almost 50% of his targets were flat routes and screens and crossers. And then when you throw in go routes, almost 60% of his routes were screens, flat routes, crossers, and goes.
Come on, numbers. Come on.
I'm just saying he doesn't come off to me as a prototypical wide receiver, because they call him what? The Yak King. 5'11", 215, and can do some things after the catch. And I listened to McCarthy talk about a Randall Cobb role. I don't think that Deuce was big enough for it. 5'11", 215. Malachi Corely is big enough to do that. And I just wonder if they're thinking about him as a potential running back.
Yeah, I think any team that picks up a Malachi Corely needs to look at him as a guy that can. Now, granted, like, as we talked about this on the show, looking at him, you have to consider a scheme with some of these players. Yep. And with a lot of how they use him was obviously by design. So I personally felt like, I know Bobby brought up on the show, he was like, sometimes the route running is not, he wasn't doing a whole bunch of route running in college. But then when you turn on, that's why I think the Senior Bowl and that stuff is important, because when you look at the Senior Bowl, you see some of the route running ability. You see how fluid his releases are and how he can get off press, and he has a good feel for guys. I think any team that picks him up should look at him as, this is a guy that has receiver traits and can develop into a good receiver, but he also, to some degree, is an extension of your backfield, and that's powerful to me, especially in this game, and the way that, we see the San Frans and some of these teams that are successful use their wide receivers in a lot of different ways. I think he could be a matchup nightmare for a lot of people. And like you mentioned, like, the screen game is his moneymaker, and some of the stuff he does, it's great. But for me, and anytime we talk about run game or anything like that, man, I want these players, but at the same time, I'm concerned because I know what the run scheme looked like last year. So I'm like, if you are going to bring in a guy like a Malachi Corely, I'm praying to Jeebus that that you use him in the ways that he works best.
Yeah, and I have my concerns about him as a pure wide receiver in a West Coast style of offense that requires a little nuance, that requires a little bit more. I'm not saying it's the Kellen Moore situation, right? But you do have to have a little bit more expanded route tree in a sense, and you have to have an ability to go inside, outside. Coach McCarthy loves that. So I'm just thinking of year one, and I'm like, I don't know if year one he comes in here and he kind of fits into what they do from a receiver standpoint. He would be more of a wild card player if he's going to be a wide receiver. But I have to say, well, the Cowboys already have a wild card player that they don't use a lot. Not saying he's as good as this guy or as big as him in Kevontae Turpin, but they haven't shown the ability to constantly use those guys in that manner. However, if they were to move Malachi Corely to running back, now you can use kind of that make people miss ability, that he's a tough runner, right? You can use him out the backfield more in a traditional West Coast style, because I have concerns as a wide receiver downfield. He posted one of the more poor contested catch rates of wide receivers in the draft, 22% in regards to contested catch rate. So he's not a guy that you just throw it up downfield and he's going to bring it down, 50% of the time like some of these other top guys. It's a bit tough. Everything is underneath, and we've seen McCarthy have experience. Ty Montgomery, wide receiver, putting back running back. Randall Cobb did some running back things. I wonder, again, I keep bringing up what he said about Deuce. I wonder if they view him as a guy like, okay, look, he may not be a traditional wide receiver for us, but if we can kind of work him into being a running back year one into this room, and then eventually he can maybe full-time be running back, I could see Malachi being a guy on day two. They say, yeah, let's go.